Welcome to Motherhood. Whether you're 18 or 80, Dr. Christina Hibbert, clinical psychologist, author, and mother of 6, is here to help you through the ups and downs, the joys and frustrations, the new information from experts, and the stories of happiness and heartbreak from real moms. Remember, if you can, tell your mama to listen too.
And I'll make everything all right.
Here's Christy.
Welcome to Motherhood. It's me, Dr. Christina Hibbert, here to help you overcome, to become, and to flourish in this memorable experience we call motherhood. Today we're going to be focusing in on some of the times when we focus most on that memorable experience of motherhood, when we think of the things that matter most, when we focus on our family, on, our being moms, being grandmothers, our future, and what we hope for our children. And what I'm talking about is times when we face big, huge challenges, especially health challenges, maybe even end-of-life challenges, and, just even loss of a loved one, things that are huge and sometimes can feel so overwhelming that we don't want to think about it. And we certainly don't want to talk about it, so we don't. But it's important for us to talk about these things because it's part of life, of course, for all of us. And all of us know or will know somebody, or eventually it'll be us on the other side, who is going through these things. And it really is a time where we reflect back on our experience as mothers and our families. And we're going to talk with a very special guest today who's been going through this process herself and has learned some really important insights and wisdom to share with us that can help us all through our motherhood journey to make it more memorable and hopefully to help us to know how to not only deal with our own challenges that come our way, but also how do we really focus on the moments of motherhood and remember them and not take them for granted. I think that's so easy to do. We get frustrated, we get stressed. And today we're going to talk about, hopefully get a little inspiration on how to keep what matters most in the forefront of our mind. So before we get started, again, thank you for joining us. I hope you'll just visit my website, drchristinahibbert.com, for all kinds of links to the resources and things we talk about today. I have some great resources there also on coping with some of the challenges we'll be talking about today with grief and loss especially, and other kinds of motherhood challenges you might face. So please visit there to get some more help and to reach out and find out about our social media groups. You can find us on our Facebook group at Growing Through Motherhood, as well as all over on social media. We'd love to connect with you and hear more about what you're going through and what you want to hear on the show. And also, if you have a great idea for a guest, we'd love to hear that. And be sure to visit YouTube where you can find videos of all of the episodes, including today's. Now, as I said, we're going to introduce our special guest in just a moment, but I was thinking about an experience that I had when I was going through some of the hard times of my life after my sister and brother-in-law had died, and trying to figure out how to raise 6 kids and not be a crazy person and, try to just deal with the chaos that came every day. And I had an older friend who, her children were all grown and out of the house, and she was just saying, as we hear all the time, when you're raising young children, you hear from those who don't have young children anymore, enjoy every moment because it goes so fast and, don't take it for granted. And I had remembered her words and kept thinking of them. And I remember one day it was pure chaos in our house. I don't even remember what was going on. I just know that everybody was screaming. The house was like a bomb went off. Everybody was it was just crazy. And I was at my wit's end. I was exhausted and I was just ready to just lose it. But instead, I remembered my friend's words, and I remember standing on the stairs, and we have a skylight above. And so I sort of just stopped and I looked up through the skylight and I saw the sun and I took a deep breath and I said a little prayer, and I thought, okay, whenever I feel like, I'm going to lose it, remember the future when I'll wish that I could have these moments back, and pay attention and notice what's going on and try to see the good in the chaos. Because these are the things that we miss later and that we'll remember and that we want to have those experiences in our life. So that's something that's helped me through those challenges when it's easier to just kind of not pay attention than it is to really focus in on what matters most. And hopefully today we can all feel a little inspired to help us bring us back to those things that are really important in life. Now, let's go ahead and finally introduce our guest. Kim Frederickson is here with us today. Kim, welcome back to Motherhood again.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back. Thank you. And I loved your story there at the beginning. What an important moment to just center yourself and remember what matters most. That's excellent.
Thank you. And it's hard to do when it's just
Yes,
a normal
it is.
normal life. I mean, when the big things happen, it seems like it makes us start to remember and reflect and focus on that. But I'm hoping today we can also talk about how to take that experience into the daily life,
Yes.
where it's so easy to just forget, take for granted. So, okay. So before we get started, let me introduce Kim again. Actually, I just interviewed her not long ago and wanted to have her back again because there's so much wisdom that she has to share, and I just really loved talking with you. So really, it's purely selfish.
It was fun too. I enjoyed it.
I just love learning from you, and I can't wait to, read all of your books. I've started in on one of them, and anyway, I'm really excited to share your work and you with everybody today. So just to officially tell everybody a little bit about Kim Frederickson is a licensed marriage and family therapist of 30 plus years, and she loves to teach others about the power of self-compassion from a faith perspective. She is the author of Give Yourself a Break, Turning Your Inner Critic into a Compassionate Friend, and Give Your Kids a Break, Parenting with Compassion for You and Your Children. And be sure to check out our episode on self-compassion with Kim here on Motherhood. So be sure to check that out as well. She recently retired from counseling practice when she was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, which is a terminal lung disease that developed as a rare complication after and from the chemotherapy and radiation she received from breast cancer. She has been through a lot of health challenges in these past years. And after being diagnosed with this terminal illness, she decided to write this new book on giving your kids a break as a way to help have that positive influence for her adult children and her grandchildren in the future. She wanted them to be able to help overcome the challenges of parenting when the time came. And she knew that she might not be able to hold her grandbabies and help her children raise them. So this was originally for them. And eventually she decided to self-publish it, to give it out to all of us so we can all learn from her many years of wisdom and practice. She's also been married to her husband, Dave, for 39 years, and they have 2 grown children. And you can find out more about her on her blog at kimfrederickson.com. She also writes a weekly column for Pulmonary Fibrosis News, which is called Just Breathe, Compassionate Help for the PF Journey. And thousands of patients have read that, so you can check that out too if you know anybody who's going through this as well. So, Kim, all right, let's just start with talking a little bit more. Last time when we talked, as I mentioned when I was done, we just touched a little bit on your personal experience, and then we talked about self-compassion, which is part of your experience too, and shared some wonderful tools there. I really encourage everybody to go check out that episode. But also, I felt like I wanted to hear more of your personal experience and what you've learned along the way as you have gone through all these health challenges, and now you are facing that end of life experience. And it's not often we get to talk to people who are willing to talk about what they're going through and what it's been like and what they've learned. So first of all, if you want to just kind of sum up, your experiences getting you to this point where you are now, and then we can maybe talk about some of the things you've learned.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
I think I got the news. Let's see, just to give a perspective on the timeline, I was diagnosed with breast cancer 4.5 years ago, and I got the news 4 days or started having problems 4 days after I finished treatment for breast cancer, and then was diagnosed pretty shortly thereafter. So I've known about being diagnosed with a terminal illness, pulmonary fibrosis, for 3.5 years. So my answer is, it's been 3.5 years, and it's still really, really hard all the time. But in the beginning was obviously the worst. And so there's just this whole process of, I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but just grieving through your reality and all the things that means, not just for you, but for your family, for all the things you want to accomplish before you pass away, taking care of business. I mean, there's so much. There's the emotional challenges and spiritual and relational and all the people in your life who are having just as much, if not more, problem adjusting to reality. And there's just a whole lot. And so I would say for me, maybe the first 2 years probably were full of tumult and, just really struggling with my reality and dealing with closing my practice and letting all my clients know and making sure I referred them to people and moving my office. I mean, there's just a lot of things that have to happen. And every single one of those involves grief and working through all the pain. So I'm in more of I know it sounds bizarre, but I'm in more of a sweet spot now in the sense that I have accepted it. And, I go through grief all the time, pockets of it though. So it doesn't lay me out like it used to. And then I'm just honestly enjoying, like, this time of year, I'm enjoying all the lights and the wonders of Christmas, and I'm enjoying every moment I have with my family and my friends. And so I'm just kind of relishing the good that I can still enjoy, because if you don't work through loss, my case, it's going to be passing away, but I mean, everyone has loss all the time, every day. We have things that are different than what we thought, things that happen to our loved ones, happen to us, whatever it is, fill in the blank. But if you don't grieve through it, not only do you lose what you've lost, you lose future living as well. I mean, it takes away your future as well as whatever the loss actually is. And so I feel very fortunate and blessed that I'm able to work through all of that grief so that I can really enjoy these things that are important to me.
Absolutely. Right. And that's such an important lesson. I know we're going to talk a lot more about grief later and grieving the process. It's a process that you're, like you say, you go through. It's not just a one-time thing for anybody out there. No, definitely not. But I have a question. I mean, so you had experienced breast cancer. Did you feel that sort of facing your own mortality going through that experience at all? Or
I did a little bit because they told me I might have 10 years. In general, that diagnosis, I had the very aggressive kind. Unfortunately, it hadn't spread. And so, I had a better prognosis, but that particular kind of cancer, it's called triple negative, is very aggressive. And so that one has a lesser mortality. So, of course, I grieved a lot. I'm like, 10 years, how could that be? Now I think, gosh, 10 years, that's incredible. That'd be great.
Right.
So because my timeline is 3 to 5 years. It's what they say. And it's been 3.5. So 10 sounds incredible.
Yeah,
so
right. It's all perspective, right? My goodness. Well, and how devastating that must have been. I can only imagine finally getting through the treatment and you're just thinking, I'm done. And then you're not. You're really starting the battle then.
I'm starting an even bigger battle. Absolutely. Yeah, it was just shocking.
You didn't even get a break there.
No, not at all. Like about 4 days later, I'd finished radiation. That was the last part of the treatment. And I went to take a deep breath and I couldn't breathe all the way down. I don't know how. I've never had that experience before. And I was like, well, this is weird. So I went right to the doctor and they started doing testing and, found out that that's what it was. And like only 1% of people does that happen to.
Oh my gosh. And it's from the treatment. The treatment actually caused this.
It did.
Wow.
But honestly, because I had that aggressive kind, had I not gone through the treatment, I would have already passed away.
Yeah.
I mean,
you had to do that. Yeah.
Just to tell you I had had a mammogram 9 months before I found the lump and there was nothing there.
Wow.
And then I found the lump myself, went straight to the doctor that day. So it was just a very fast growing kind.
Wow. Yeah. And that's a lesson for us all too, to make sure that we're doing our self-exams and mammograms because you never know. I mean, it really can happen fast,
Yeah.
For sure. Wow. What an experience. So, let's kind of also like talk about, I read in the introduction about how you came to this realization that you probably wouldn't be around for your grandchildren. And that kind of prompted you to write this book. And you've been able to do this to, finish all this work while you've been going through this illness and facing all these challenges. Tell us a little bit about, how that whole process came about with that realization. And then also, how were you able to sort of get yourself to do all that work? It's hard enough when you're not facing health challenges.
Oh gosh, it is a lot of work.
End of life, my goodness.
I I had a couple advantages, honestly, I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually working on a different book, and I might finish it. I don't know if I will. It's about being compassionate with yourself as you face a terminal illness. And my agent presented it to a couple publishers who actually weren't interested in it, which was surprising to me, because of the narrow topic. But it's like, well, it's not really narrow because everyone dies and everyone knows people who are dying. But,
right.
But anyway, at the end at that proposal, I was like, well, what do I want to write? And immediately was like, I want to write a parenting book for my children, because we have two kids. Our older child is married now, just got married 6 months ago. And our daughter is not married, but, eventually she will be and have children. And I just wanted to, I realized, I'm probably not going to be here. So what could I do? And I used to teach parenting classes. That's one of my advantages, I had 20 years of parenting classes on my computer. Wow. And so, of course, it took an enormous amount of work to get it from handout stage to book stage. So that was not easy, but I had somewhere to start. I had a place to start. So I just put them all together, and actually I had to leave 3 chapters out because it was just too long. I just give those to them on my own. But but honestly, in a way it sounds silly, but not so much. As I was writing, and I was putting in self-compassion and little stories about them throughout the book, and as I was doing that, I just thought, this is actually really good. Like, I really liked what I was writing. And I thought, I think this will be truly helpful to people. And that's when I thought about, well, maybe I'll just self-publish it. Wow. So I told them both, actually it was last Christmas, I said, I wanted to surprise you with this, but, and I told them what I was doing, but I really like it, and I'd like to know if you would be okay if I self-published it. I said, but I'm really only writing it for you. I'm doing it no matter what. And they both said, yeah, that was fine. So I appreciated that. I know.
That's so great. Wow.
I know. So anyway, so then I just really got to work on it. And so one of my advantages was I started with a lot of, outlines of chapters and some material. The second advantage that I have is that, and I feel so grateful to God for what I'm going to tell you, is even though I have this life-threatening illness and my lungs are slowly getting worse, and like I use supplemental oxygen and I have to keep requiring more and more, and I'm clearly worsening. But even though that's happening, I'm not really in a lot of pain. I mean, occasionally I am. Occasionally I have some tightness in my chest from my lungs and things. I mean, hardly ever though, really. And so if I had, like, for instance, if I wanted to do this while I was being treated for breast cancer, there's no way in the world that could have happened. Yeah. I mean, I could have never written it feeling sick all the time and in pain, and never. So because the illness that I have, although incredibly serious, doesn't have a lot of pain, I get very tired, but I'm not in pain. So I can still think, I can process. That's why I was able to do it. If it'd been any other kind of illness, I couldn't have done it.
Yeah. That is such a blessing, and thank goodness that has been the case, because you're right. I mean, it does take so much time and energy to do that kind of a work, and you do get tired easy, but the pain and illness, and, as I've shared before, my mother's been through breast cancer several times, and I mean, I just watching her was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know how you could do anything but survive during that point.
I mean, you can't.
Right. Yeah. So what a blessing to be able to do this for your children, and then to get to share it to help other people. Yeah. And to be able to give this gift at this time of your life. So it's making me think about all the people out there that are listening right now. Yes, you listening, who are thinking, I want to write a book, or I want to, create something, or I want to do a painting, or I want to whatever, fill in the blank. And we just don't think we have time, or we don't have the energy, or we can't do it because maybe you're in a phase of life or motherhood that's just busy, or whatever it might be. What do you say to those who are having those kind of thoughts and feelings?
That is such a good question. So I think what I would say is do something. So in other words, it's true. Your situation is a factor. I mean, you can't deny that if you have really small children and you're busy all the time, you probably can't add something big like that. It's true. But you can do something. So let's say it's that you want to write a book or you want to leave, whatever it is.
Create something, yeah.
Yeah, just jot things down. Have pieces of paper around you anytime. I used to have pieces of paper in my purse and all over that I would just jot ideas down. So whatever that thing is that you want to do, don't think of it as this huge thing that I have to do and there's no way I can do it. Think of it as, you know what, I'm just going to start collecting my thoughts. And so I'm just going to jot ideas down, or maybe it's projects you want to accomplish, or like you said, a painting. Leave a little bit of time at night to sketch or to do a little watercolor or whatever it is that you do. Do something really small, but do something, because then that part of you remains alive and remains nurtured in some way. Yeah. And then you can gather up. I mean, a lot of the things I've written over the years, because I've written lots of things, over the years have just come from scraps of paper that I had a great idea and I didn't want to lose it. And then later I just pulled them all together. So yeah, do something.
Do something. That is the best advice. The best advice. And when you do something, it doesn't, and don't think, oh, I shouldn't do this because it's too small or it won't matter. Like you said, a scrap of paper with an idea can become something great. And it's those small things that lead to the great things, right?
It sure does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. So let's talk about some of the things that you've learned along the way and how you've been able to, I mean, what I was so impressed with talking to you last time is just I don't know, I mean, you naturally obviously have this kind of soothing and peaceful quality about you, but to be at peace in that sense and to, be so mindful of others, like you were even reaching out to me because I was going through something, just to even be thinking of others in that way and to be reaching out shows that you are in a truly good place, despite your circumstances. And that's not easy. Like you said, it's probably taken some time and tumult to get to this point.
Yeah.
So, how, what's that process been like to get to this point? And then maybe we could touch on, you say there are 3 things that really stand out for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the first thing, before I get to the 3 things, is just the acceptance that it's a process. Like, give yourself permission. So who's ever listening or watching, think about something you're really struggling with. Give yourself permission for it to be a process. I mean, I'm a trained therapist. I am good with emotion. I, have more knowledge than most. But I was in complete chaos for at least 2 years. And so it's a process. Even if you have a lot of skills, you need to give your whole system, your mind, your heart, your soul, your spirit, chances to adjust to whatever your new normal is, whatever that is. And so first, just give yourself permission to be in process. Nobody just flips a switch. If they do, it's actually not real, and it will come back and bite them in the butt. I mean, they may not do it on purpose, but nobody does it at one point.
It's more of a shock or a numbing or just like an immediate reaction, like you said.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great.
And then the 3 things, because I've been thinking about this recently, because I do often have people comment on what you just did. It's like, wow, you have such a serious illness, but you're kind of okay, And of course, like I said, I go up and down with grief all the time. Yeah. But I am okay. And so I really started thinking, well, what is it? Because it's a good question. And I came up with 3 tools, I guess, I think that's the best word, tools that have super helped me. And I need all 3 of them. I think without all of them, I would not be doing as well.
Right.
And so I'll just list them, what they are, and then you can ask me whatever questions you want. But
okay, sounds good.
The 3 things that I thought of that keep me stable and connected to myself and connected to God and others, and in reality, I would say, is number 1, my faith. So my faith in God keeps me grounded and gives me support and all of those things. And then 2 is self-compassion. Being compassionate with myself on this journey. And I can't remember if I told you this or not, but when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, after I cried for a while, I said out loud, I was in my office actually, I said out loud, I'm going to be a really good friend to myself on this journey. Because my best friend had breast cancer and passed away from it. And I saw what she went through, and I just knew I need to be a good friend to myself.
Yeah.
And then the third one is knowing how to grieve. Grieve well is what I call it, because grief is God's gift to us to get through the realities and hardships of life.
Yes.
It's a way to get from, where you were before this event happened, whatever it is, get you through the event and get you to a place of acceptance where life is different and not what you would choose, but you can still enjoy the good that's there.
Beautifully said. And I love those three. So I want to dive into those a little deeper. And for everybody listening, you may not be facing, such a big challenge as Kim is, but I don't want anybody out there thinking, well, her challenges are so big and important and mine are just small. I'm just stressed, or I'm just overwhelmed, or I'm just a mom, or whatever you're thinking. I don't want anybody minimizing what you're going through. I love that you're saying that, like whatever you're going through, these are things that can help you in that situation too. And I think hearing your story will help everybody. I know it's helped me. It just helps us to remember the importance of, focusing on what matters and not taking life for granted and finding that peaceful place now while we can, and, we don't have to wait for the big challenge to come to suddenly learn the life lessons that we need to learn, right? In fact,
exactly.
It's better off if we learn them right now than wait. So
sure is.
Everything Kim says today applies to us all. So that's just something I want everybody to remember. So first of all, let's talk about faith and, that process of, how faith has helped you through. And maybe if you have any suggestions for those who are listening and thinking, gosh, I don't know how strong my faith is. I just want to share a little experience. A few years back, many years back, maybe, I remember I was with a friend and we were doing something through our church, like an activity, a service project. And we were coming back and we were talking about what we were good at and not so good at. And she said her strength was faith. And I said, oh, I don't think that's one of mine. Even though I had wanted it to be, I felt like that just wasn't one of my strengths at that time. I felt like I questioned everything. I felt like I doubted things. I had too many questions about stuff. And it's not like I wasn't acting in faith. It's just, I just didn't feel like that was something that came naturally. And she just gave me this great lesson, just shared her faith with me and explained how it was for her. And, and just told me that she knows that I have that in me, and just that encouragement from her made me go home and start praying for faith, to have greater faith. And I feel like that is one of my strengths now, so
wow,
I feel like that's
isn't
something,
that great?
Right? So we can grow that. So for anybody listening who's thinking, I don't know about this faith thing, I think that's something that I struggle with. I just want you all to know you can definitely improve and grow in that area. So maybe some words of wisdom on sort of how that's come around for you and how it's helped you, and then maybe what other people might take away from that.
Sure. And I love that story. Thank you for telling that, because it's so encouraging.
Thank you.
That you can start in a certain place and feel like you're not developed in that area as much as you'd like. And that doesn't, so what? I mean, you can grow and learn, and that's fine. I mean, that's how everything is, right?
Absolutely.
So that's very encouraging.
Thank you.
Sure. So what I would say, because I jotted down a few notes about, well, what are the, points about my faith? And I think the first one that just gives me such comfort is just, I know that God is always with me. He's always with me. He loves me. He cares about me. He has great concern for me. Everyone dies. It's not like he's failed me. Right. I'm a grown adult with grown children. Think how many people pass away earlier in life. Like, I have lived a good life. I really am grieved that I won't be able to be a grandmother, because that was something I was looking forward to. But everyone dies. It's not like he's failed me. Yeah. And so, and he wants my good. He really does. And I have seen him provide for me in remarkable ways through other people and through just the way that people care for me. And I have these ladies from my church who, like 2 years ago, on their own, 2 of them decided they were going to bring a meal every week, and they just trade off.
Wow.
And they've been doing this for 2 years. And I keep saying, if you ever need to stop, like, I won't be offended. Like, that's a long, no, 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 we love to do it. And just like this, I didn't ask for that. It just came to me. And I have just some other things that have happened that have made my life easier, and people encourage me all the time. And honestly, Christy, you're part of it in the sense of, this book that I just launched like 2 months ago, or almost 2 months ago. Well, I'm at home almost all the time because I'm on such a high level of oxygen. It's very hard to travel around. And, I'm fine sitting here talking, but if I was to go somewhere to speak, and I honestly, especially this time of year, I can't be around a lot of people because I can get sick very easily, and that's very bad for me. Like me getting a cold with a lung disease is not a good thing. And so I've not been able to do the things I did with my first book, where I spoke all over the place, and I did radio interviews and TV interviews, and I did lots of stuff to promote my book. But this one, it's like it's all online or through podcasts because I can't go do those things. Yeah. And so, God hooked us up and provided me with you and others who've been willing to help out. And, any of you who want to share about this podcast or my book or whatever, it's like that's the way God's provided to get the word out, because I can't do it myself.
Yes. Wow. And so all things come together for your good in the end,
they
right?
They do. And so I focus too on the greater purpose. I mean, I've had so many people tell me that they've been encouraged by sort of watching me go through this this journey, which honestly, I'm not trying to do anything I'm not trying to be inspirational. I'm just putting one foot in front of the other. Like, there's no master plan here, but somehow God is using something so awful for good. And I'm grateful for that. Yeah. And, I lean on him, and I really use my time wisely. Because I don't have a lot of time and energy. Like, after this podcast, I'll have to go lay down for about 2 hours because it takes a little bit of effort from me, but I love doing it. So.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad you can do it and that you will. Absolutely. That's so great. And I hope, everybody listening, you can learn from this. And one thing that I'm thinking as you're saying this is you have to notice these things, though. And I think a lot of times there are these little blessings or these little helps along the way, but we're only seeing the negative, or we're only feeling the negative, and we don't look for the good actively. I mean, I'm sure that's part of faith for you, is you have to kind of like sort through the negative stuff and find that good stuff. Because there's always a lot of good out there, even amidst all the tragedy. Yeah. There always is. So I would just say to people who are watching or listening, just to reach out to God, to do kind of like what you did. It's like, Lord, either I'm not really even sure if you're out there, or I don't feel like I have faith. I don't feel like I do know how to trust you or lean on you. Yeah. And would you help me learn how? Would you, somehow be with me, give me strength, or give me ideas or resources or help? Because I actually do want you to be part of what I'm going through. That's all you have to say. He'll be good to his word. That's right. And much better than you probably could even imagine if you let it in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to say about faith too, because I know there are probably some listeners that might, have different religious understanding or belief systems, of course. But one thing I've learned about faith is it's a principle of power. And really, if you think about it, you cannot do anything without faith. You cannot sit up in bed, get up, know that when you put your foot on the ground and walk, that you will walk. You know that when you set your mind to a project, that it will happen. So there is, and that of course comes through, from our belief system, it comes through the power of God, it comes to us. But, really it's something that we use all the time. We just don't think of it in that way. Right.
Absolutely. I love that.
So start even there, start to notice the faith that you have in what you're doing, or how you're mothering, or how you love people, or something that's good about yourself that you see. And then go from there, and then maybe hope. And I love that you said, maybe the prayer is sort of like, I don't even know if you're there, but, if so, help me out here.
Yeah,
or
help me out, please.
Yeah, just show me the way, or, just lead me to something that can be my next step or whatever it might be, right? Or even
Yes.
just help me to know the right questions to ask, because I don't even know what to even ask or how to develop that faith in me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love all that.
All of that. So, and this leads nicely into then self-compassion. And of course, we talked last time about self-compassion, and we talked about it with our children. And, of course, I encourage everybody to go get both of your books on self-compassion. And I forgot to mention your recordings, which they can find through your website too, kimfredrickson.com.
Right.
And you can hear her voice. She's just so soothing and calming. And these are just beautiful little self-compassion recordings to help us to kind of have a better voice in our heads. Give us that other voice that we can lean on till we strengthen our own. That's right. That's right. It helps us in that process. So self-compassion. And you shared, I love that story that you shared about your friend who you lost to breast cancer, and how compassionate you were, and how you literally said it out loud. So many of us, I think, we either don't think to do it, or we think it's silly, or we think, it's not necessary to tell ourselves. But there's power in our words, is there not?
Right. There is. And honestly, we're telling ourselves negative stuff all the time.
True.
I mean, maybe we don't mean to, but we're telling ourselves something, right?
That's right.
So it really matters to be able to talk to yourself with kindness, giving yourself permission to fail and to learn and to grow and to be human, honestly. I think we just expect ridiculous things of ourselves, that somehow we're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to know everything. It's just crazy, actually.
It is.
Everything's a process, and we learn everything through trial and error. Everyone does. And so how will you treat yourself and take care of yourself? And
yeah, I'm thinking about that. Like, what have you learned about self-care and this idea that we all have, especially our moms here? We talk about it all the time on this show. How, like you said, it's ridiculous what we expect of ourselves. It's not realistic. And we put all this pressure, and we don't want to take care of ourselves, or we think it's not worthy. We're not worthy of it, or we're selfish if we do that. And here are you, like, saying, I am literally going to have to go take a 2-hour nap after this. And I think it is like when we face health challenges or mental health challenges that literally knock you down. When last summer, when I experienced this really bad concussion and I was literally dropped on my head, I felt like it was sort of the answer to my prayers, in the sense of like, oh, you won't slow yourself down? Then here you go.
Yeah. Here's a way to do that.
That's right. For 8 months, I couldn't
Oh,
look at
I
a
didn't
computer.
know that.
I couldn't, and I seemed normal, and everybody thought I was normal on the outside, but I did not feel normal, and I felt like I couldn't do what I wanted to do, and I couldn't do the work I wanted to do. I had to stop seeing clients. I had to do, all of that. It was just too much for my brain. Yeah. And even though I'm healed now, there's still like limits. I get tired. My brain gets tired. I can't focus as much. Just things that are different. So, those kinds of things, I think, definitely show us that we have to take care of ourselves because you're sick. And if you don't, then X, Y, and Z. But, what have you learned about this self-care part of self-compassion through your experiences that might help those out there who maybe aren't experiencing an illness or something that actually stops them, but need to slow down or need to take care of themselves better? Right.
Yeah, I think the thing I would say is there's so much out there about self-care and like, make sure I'm just throwing some things out I hear, make sure you're taking time for yourself and you're exercising, you're eating good food. I mean, those are all good suggestions, but the thing I would add to that is think about yourself and think about, what is it that soothes me? What is it that helps me relax? What is it that helps me take a deep breath and sigh? Where do I get a little bit of peace? And those are the kind of things that I would recommend for self-care. So for someone, it might be, doing crossword puzzles at the end of the day when everybody's gone to bed. I mean, maybe that doesn't sound like that wouldn't be on somebody's list of self-care, but for that person, it's just wonderful. Or taking a hot bath, or, I used to do when my kids were really little, they were 18 months apart. I would twice a week, before they got in preschool, I got a babysitter for 2 hours twice a week. And seriously, I would take a magazine and go sit at McDonald's and drink a Diet Coke, because they didn't have, there was no Starbucks or coffee houses back then. It was just fast food, right? And there was a McDonald's right around the corner from me. And I would sit there, and sometimes I would read my magazine, And most of the time I would just stare into space and enjoy the fact that no one was talking to me and no one was asking me for something. No one was spitting up on me. And so that's what I did for self-care.
Wow.
Because for me, I just needed some quiet.
Yeah.
And I did it twice a week, 2 hours twice a week. That was my self-care.
Oh, that's so good. And I love that because you're giving people permission to do the same, We all think about it.
But think about it for yourself, I would say.
Oh,
Don't,
so good.
It's nice if you even like my idea, but just think about what is it that works for me? What just gives me, what soothes me?
Right. And I love that. Okay. So everybody, that's the question. And as you said that, I was looking up because I'm thinking, what soothes me? Because that's a perfect question. And no one's ever asked me that. What soothes you? What soothes you, everybody? What soothes you? And can you answer that, first of all? Or do you have to take some time to think? Like, do you know right away? Or does it take some time? Because if it takes some time, probably you haven't been doing those things for a while. And you probably really, really need to do them. But what soothes you? And then, to, like you said, to personalize it and to let that answer be your own. And I love that you gave this example because it shows you don't have to be doing something, quote, productive or whatever in that time while your kids are gone. Because most people think, oh, my kids are away at school or I have a babysitter, so I need to clean the house or I need to get the project done.
Exactly.
But I love that you could just sit there and do nothing, just relax, rest. Yeah. That's what you need.
It was good for me. And then I came back a much better mom because of it,
Yes, absolutely. And for me, sometimes it's just like, it's like tuning out. I have a do not disturb sign. I put it on my door. I tell the kids, do not come in. Sometimes I'm just watching TV, honestly.
Right, exactly.
And then maybe I fall asleep. Maybe I don't. Maybe I pick up a book. But I can just do what I want with that time.
Absolutely.
And that's what I need that day. So, really, that's such a great example for everybody. Give you all permission and encouragement to ask what suits you and then do that thing.
Right.
Put it into your life.
Yeah. And in fact, in the first book, the Give Yourself a Break, I have a whole entire chapter on self-soothing techniques because most people don't know how to help their system calm down, how to soothe. Most people don't know. And so then what happens is you just do all this frenzy stuff trying to feel better somehow, but it makes everything worse.
Right.
So
wow. Yeah. That's great. So what a great tool. So everybody definitely check that out. I'm going to go look that up because I have your book too. I'm going to go look that up because I think sometimes we do need a jump start. We need some ideas of what to do. We're not quite sure. So giving us some suggestions is perfect. So, okay. So we want to have faith and self-compassion. And then the third thing that you've experienced, and I really love and appreciate that you've explained how this isn't just because you have a terminal illness or you've been through these health challenges. This is for everybody. We all have losses all the time. And grief is a continual part of that. And I've learned I've been through a lot of death and loss in my life, and I've had a lot of grief. And I have learned that when we don't grieve, it does kind of like stay in there and add up. And then another thing happens. Like we recently had something happen with one of our sons, and it wasn't a death or anything or an illness, but it was a loss. And it brought back some of the old death loss that I had experienced with my friend who died 3 years ago. Just things like that. I was like, it feels like when my friend died. This is so weird because it's so not even close to that. It's not even that level of, intensity, but still, it's just when we don't grieve, it does kind of pile up. And I love that you have already mentioned how it's really a process. So tell us a little bit about how you've been able to go through that grief process and let it come and experience it. Cause I think a lot of times we also fight it. And how, others might follow your lead in that.
Absolutely. So, I wanted to, before we started to talk today, I printed out a section in the second book because I'm just mentioning it because I actually give lots of examples in there. Oh, okay. And what I do is actually I'm saying, parents, you need to help your children learn to grieve because and I'll get to myself in a second, but because their lives, like ours, are just full of continual times of grief. Now, maybe they're small things, maybe they're medium, maybe they're huge, but that's part of life. Like that isn't actually life going terribly. That's part of life. Is things don't always work out and it's important to grieve. And so I have a whole section in there about each stage and then about how to talk to yourself compassionately during each stage. Because that's the thing that's so important, that kind of links the other things, is that our grief, if it can be done in a self-compassionate way, and in other words, part of our self-care, then it has even more power. So that's what I've done. I mean, that's why I know about it, because that's what I've done. And honestly, I want to say this because I'll forget it, but I think part of why I'm handling this better than maybe some is that I was already practicing all of this. In other words, I already practiced my faith and self-compassion and grief through a lot of other very difficult things that I've been through, like very difficult. And so I was already in training for something like this that's even bigger. So honestly, because it's been a part of my life when I wasn't going through a terminal illness, it's made going through it actually easier. So that's why I think doing it, learning these skills now is so important, because the rest of life has so many wonderful, wonderful, priceless things, but it also has some real sorrow. And it's important to be able to learn how to process those emotions.
So
and
important.
I think sometimes we scramble around trying to make sure bad things don't happen. It's like, oh, that ship has sailed. I mean, like, we don't have the power to not make bad things happen.
That's right. It's just going to happen. Let go. Yep.
Exactly. We have the power to grieve well and to be kind to ourselves in the process. So
it's how we react to all that counts.
Exactly.
So I love this. I want to break down a few things you said before we go forward. So first of all, I really appreciate your advice for the parents. And that's from Give Your Kids a Break. So there's a whole section in there on how to help them grieve. What an important tool and skill. And, I've had to do that with my children because they were young when they've lost very close loved ones, including two that have lost both their parents, So we've had to teach that because of that. But absolutely, especially look at your kids. I mean, everything's a loss. When they lose a toy, it's a loss. When they lose a friend, it's a loss.
Falls off the cone. I mean, it's just a crisis, right?
Right. So how do we help them to deal with that and identify that? And I really appreciate, I've never heard it put this way, that grief is part of your self-care.
It is.
Because that makes it seem like, oh, that's just a normal part of everyday life and not just to be saved for the huge bad things that happen in life.
Exactly. Because that's what we think of as, you're grieving because someone passed away. It's like, oh no, you're grieving probably every day in some small way.
Yeah.
So
that's great. And then I want to ask you this, and then we'll talk more, we'll get more into the grief, but I remember I was thinking this after our conversation last time. Can you share with us some of that practice that you've done with self-compassion? Like, what kinds of things have you done over the years to develop that skill, that our listeners might want to give a try?
Sure. I think just for me, the most important part is not all of it by any means, but is just how you speak to yourself is, and I don't mean, people will say, do positive self-talk. Self-compassion talk is different. Because positive self-talk to me, I mean, it's nothing wrong with it, but it's just like, look on the bright side, things will get better. But self-compassionate talk is, honey, you're going through a tough time. Like, it's really hard that you can't go visit your relatives for Christmas. And it's really difficult. And anybody would feel this way. And it's really hard. So what can we do to maybe make it a little bit easier? Like, I talk to myself that way. So it's not just positives, it's actually care of yourself,
right?
Being kind to yourself. So that's the first one. And then I think, just self-care practices, like we said, and then being an advocate for yourself. Oh my gosh, when you have a serious illness, you have to be an advocate. I mean, like, I have threatened companies. I've threatened a lawsuit trying to get the kind of oxygen I need. You wouldn't think a person would have to fight for that, but I did.
Seriously.
And changed insurance companies and doctor, because my first doctor completely gave up on me and said I'd be dead within a year.
Oh
and
my gosh.
Wasn't giving me the treatment that I needed. Yeah, isn't that good?
No.
So whatever that is, I mean, mine are extreme, but whatever that is, being an advocate for yourself. And then I think the last one, and this has been maybe a bigger one for me than some, but really improving the quality of my life. So for instance, I go out of the house maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I have these portable oxygen things I have to lug around, and it's tiring for me to do that. But, I try to go to I have a rehab gym, a lung rehab gym, if you can even imagine
Oh,
that.
wow.
That's an incredible thing to go into. But anyway, I try to go to, I know it's pathetic.
Talk about exercise. My goodness.
I'm in there with like 80-year-old people. I'm on oxygen. They're not, because they have a different, not as bad illness.
Oh,
I walk
goodness.
like 0.8 miles an hour on a treadmill. I mean, like I'm barely literally moving.
Wow. Yes.
It's so pathetic.
It's humbling,
But
right?
it is. But it's good for me, and
But
I
it's
go.
good.
So I do that, and I go to the doctor, and I do still go to the grocery store because I like walking around really slow through the grocery store, but that's about all I do.
Yeah.
And so, being able to make my home and my environment as soothing and as like helping me as possible really, really helps. So like I got one of these adjustable beds that elevates, because I can't sleep flat anymore because gravity's too hard on my lungs. I have to sleep elevated, but this bed is lovely. And it's just certain things that I do. Time with friends, I make sure, and they come to my house and bring me lunch, because I really can't, it's hard to go out. So, I would say anyone listening, obviously mine are kind of extreme, but what are some things you can do in your life to improve your quality of life? To me, that's part of being compassionate with yourself.
That's so great. And we can all do one or two things to improve the quality of our life. And I'm thinking it's not even just what you do, but also what you don't do a lot of times.
Yes, what you don't. I love that.
That's what you're saying. You've limited yourself because it's not good for you to do those other things. It's not worth it. Yeah. So that's a great question. How can we improve? What is one thing I could do to improve my quality of life today?
I remember when I was younger, the kids were probably in grade school, and Lord knows why I thought this, but I decided, I wanted one of my walls in the living room to be lavender. Why? I don't know why. Because later I was like, why did I do that? But you know what? That improved the quality of my life.
That's right.
I don't know. There was something joyous about that. And like even now, I always have white lights in my living room and year round, because they make me happy. Yeah. So I mean, just even something small like that, something that brings you joy. So it doesn't have to be a big project or big anything, but what is it that would just give you a little bit of joy and improve your quality of life? So I would say that.
I love that. And I was reading recently in a book, and the author was talking about decorating her house, and she said, and for those of you who think that it's frivolous or silly for me to do this, I believe that God believes in beauty, and I'm creating beauty,
absolutely.
So this is a good thing. Whatever creates beauty in your life is going to improve your life. So that's another way to look at it. What can I do to bring a little more beauty into my life, or whatever.
Absolutely.
Peace or whatever you're seeking, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And if you do that, then you are nicely set up to then incorporate grief into your self-care, because you will have a compassionate space and place, and you will know how to speak compassionately to yourself. And like I really appreciated what you said, because I always say that too. I always say that I don't necessarily believe in positive affirmations as they are normally explained,
right?
Because we don't necessarily believe what we're saying to ourselves. So if we can
mm-hmm.
get to the place where we change what we think and believe, and then we believe it, and we're telling ourselves,
mm-hmm.
you can do this, and then we believe it, then great.
Right.
But I love that, having that self-honesty really is that compassion. And that is really an important skill when it comes to grieving, right?
It sure is. It sure is. Yeah.
So how can people grieve? I get that question all the time because that's one of my specialties. How do I grieve? I mean, what have you learned, and what would you suggest as far as people incorporating that into their self-care practice?
Sure. So, I mean, you and I can come up with it together since that's a specialty of yours as well. What I would say is just the first thing is just understand what the grief process is. And so I'm just going to rattle off the things that I think of. Yeah. It's just there's these stages. Now they don't go always in order. They can be out of order. You can finish a stage and go back to another one when something new happens. So that's all what happens. But in general, you can expect, at the beginning of whatever, when the doctor says to me, you have a few months to a year to live. And I'm like, what? Wait, what did you say? My husband's like, wait, what did you say? You're in shock, right? So you have the first is like shock and confusion. And then the second is usually denial. Well, he couldn't have said that. That couldn't be right. What they just said, maybe I misheard, or whatever the thing is,
Right.
And then the next one is bargaining, which is like, well, that's probably not right. Maybe if I do this and this and this, or God, maybe I'll go back to church and can you make that change? Or you start seeking, other kinds of treatment. Not that that's wrong, but like, in other words, you're not accepting what's been told to you, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe if I do this, let's say your child's really struggling, they've been diagnosed with a learning disability. You're like, no, I'm sure that's not right. Maybe we'll do flashcards, or we'll do, whatever the thing is. And so it's just, you're bargaining because you don't want the reality to be the reality. Yeah. So bargaining isn't a failure. Bargaining is a process. It's the way that we adjust from, wait, things used to be like this and now they're this. And so bargaining is just part of that process. It's normal. Everybody does it. And then the next is anger. Like, wait, what do you mean? How can that be? And you're angry at God. You're angry at the doctor. You're angry at the teacher. You're angry at, your spouse, your neighbor. Whoever it is who somehow you think had something to do with this happening or could have stopped it and didn't, or, whatever the thing is.
Yes.
Normal to be angry, right? Because what has happened is like not what you want, and it's awful.
And anger can sometimes move you to do something.
Yes, anger can prompt you to do something.
So it can. Exactly. It's not a bad thing. It's just an emotion.
No,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then in an immense there, of course, and these go back and forth. I could have all of them in one day.
Right.
Is sadness, just the grief of grieving this reality that is in my life and this loss. And like, wait, what do you mean? I have to walk around with oxygen all the time. Wait, what do you mean I have to close my practice and I can't work anymore?
Yeah.
What do you mean my child is not going to be able to do this because of a limitation? So there's just so much sadness and grief. And then the last is acceptance, which is where you finally get to the place of like, okay, I don't like this. I don't want this to be true, but this is what's true. Oh. And I'm going to live in reality and make the best of it. Like, I don't mean that in a Pollyannish way. I just mean, okay, if this is my reality, all right, then what can I do to make an impact, to be kind to myself, to take care of my family, to help my child, to help my spouse, to help myself, and so there's just a period of, and that's where you get to a much better place.
Yeah. And I appreciate you going through these stages of grief, because it helps. It's even helping me to see how even just one of those pieces might just, like you say, one piece might be there one day and one piece might be there another, or four or five might be there all at the same time. But as we're doing these things, as we're bargaining, as we're, feeling that grief and depression, as we're feeling anger and trying to figure out what it's telling us to do, as we're going through that, that's grieving. That's all part of the grief process. So you might not identify it that way because you're like, I'm just angry, but really the anger is part of that process, and you need to go through that.
And it's so necessary. Yeah. Because if you don't and you bury it, you'll become very depressed. You'll become inactive.
Yeah.
You'll lose, like I always think, like I write this column you mentioned for other pulmonary fibrosis patients. It's such a joy to do. But what I see is that people don't know how to grieve. Not only are they going to lose their life, like eventually, they're losing what they have now. I have life now. I certainly don't want to lose it now to being so stuck that I can't enjoy what I have now. Yeah. Like, to me, that's almost a bigger tragedy.
Definitely. Wow. I love how you put that. And we all have that right now. We have life right now. So let's not lose it now, right? Wow.
But give yourself permission at every stage. Be kind to yourself at every stage. Like, if I could, let me just read one of the self-compassionate things. Just because we can't always think about those. Sure. Like, here's one I wrote on bargaining. Let's see. I think I'm still in shock. I'm trying to do everything I can to make what I've been told not true. It's normal for me to look at every possibility for a different outcome. I want to be kind and gentle with myself as I go through this process. It's okay for me to take the time I need to adjust. So you can see how you can be kind to yourself about whatever the thing is, whatever the piece is, whatever the stage is.
Yes, that's so great. And last time we talked about self-compassion in the other episode, and one thing that you said was, to imagine that you're saying this to somebody else if you're having trouble saying it to yourself.
Yeah.
So that's another great tool that you had mentioned that I wanted to bring up because, if you're not sure what to say, then write down what you would say to somebody else and then read that to yourself.
Yeah. Imagine a good friend comes and says the exact same thing you're going through. What would you say? And it just flows out of people. Oh, well, I would tell her this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, well, that's what you need to say to yourself.
That's exactly what you need to hear. I love that. Well, it's been so fun to talk to you, Kim, and I really appreciate you being here. And at the end of this wonderful talk, I'm wondering if there's anything that stands out in your mind that you'd like to just leave the audience with related to the things we've been talking about today.
Wow, that's a big question.
I know.
I love talking to you too. That was not fair. Okay.
Sorry. I caught you off guard. I should have warned you.
I think the thing that just hit me was be kind to yourself. Going off of one of your mantras is focus on what matters. Just live life more simply. Put things off to the side that truly don't make any difference at all, and make sure that you factor in time to take care of yourself and be compassionate with yourself. Because even if things are going well in your life right now, which they very well could be, life is still very stressful. And we still give out a lot to so many people all the time. And just make sure that you're part of your 2018 and you're part of the equation, and try to fit in some time to soothe yourself and give yourself some space and do some things that matter, and make sure you include kind and compassionate talk to yourself. Because we are with each other 100% of the time, and we actually have more of an influence on ourselves than anyone else, than anything anyone else says to us. How we treat ourselves and interact with ourselves has a bigger impact than anything else.
So good. I was just listening to you like a listener instead of an interviewer just now. So I'm going to take your advice. I was just basking in it and listening and thinking, okay, how can I improve how I relate with myself and be more gentle and compassionate with myself? And again, that reminder is so important to really focus on what matters. One thing that I just want to add at the end here is just, several years ago when I was feeling confused about all that, I sat down and I just wrote down like everything that felt important to me, and then tried to kind of like summarize it into my top 5, So if you're not sure, take some time to just kind of think what really matters to you at this point of your life, and then write it down and put it somewhere where you'll see it so that you can remember
I love that
more. So anyway, I really appreciate that. And you do inspire me to be more compassionate with myself, and that definitely helps me to be more compassionate with my kids. So it helps us be better parents, right?
It sure does.
It has to start here, right?
It's a trickle down. That's right. It has to start here.
For sure. Well, thank you again, Kim. And for everybody out there, be sure to go to her website, kimfredrickson.com. As you can tell, she has so many great tools and ideas, and she has a blog, and she has these recordings you can get, and her books, of course, and just, learn from all of her years of experience and wisdom. And what a blessing that you're able to share all these with us at this time of your life. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm doing it like while I can, because pretty soon I won't be able to. So I'm relishing in that moment. Like, well, hey, I can do it now, though.
That's right. So let's do it now, right?
Let's do it now.
That's perfect.
It's my pleasure to talk with you, Christy, and also just your whole listeners. What a pleasure to be able to speak into your life and have a really good year.
Thank you. And same from me, everybody. And I hope you'll continue to grow with us here on Motherhood, as we like to do. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay.